What is this? A new teaching with authority. I have spoken to you earlier, some months back, about the existence of biblical sandwiches, where one idea is sandwiched between two identical ideas. And we have one of those going on here. We have that it begins with Jesus teaching. People say a new teaching with authority. All of a sudden, a person with an unclean spirit appears. Jesus casts out the unclean spirit. And then once again, we hear, what is this? A new teaching with authority. So the teaching is the bread. And the question that it always begs us to ask, these sandwiches always beg us to ask the question, where's the beef? And the beef is the actual new teaching. The casting out of the unclean spirit is in itself a form of teaching. And it is new teaching. It is new teaching because it shows that this new era that Jesus has brought in. This new era is the end of the line for the powers of darkness. It is the end of the line for the unclean spirits. And the authority that the gospel talks about, this new teaching with authority, the authority is that the people there actually see what is being taught. They don't just have to hear about it as a concept. It's happening before their very eyes. Those of you who are educators, you know that a lot of teaching is done by showing rather than telling. Because of course, some people learn better from what they see than from what they just hear. And also, what is shown stands as evidence, and the evidence gives that additional authority that a bunch of letters after someone's name do not. Letters like MDiv, for example. So what that tells us is that by our doing, everybody, all of us, are teachers. And St. Paul knows that very well. That's what's going on in this passage from his letter to the church in Corinth. In this epistle, Paul is talking about a form of teaching that takes place in the doing, and is pointing out that that is not always or necessarily good teaching. It's kind of the reverse of what we saw and heard in the gospel. The background is that the church in Corinth is a diverse church. It has rich and poor, it has Jews and Gentiles, it has the educated, it has the uneducated, it has slaves, it has free persons. It's a very diverse church. And some in the church are well versed already in the gospel message, but others, perhaps they're newcomers. They're not so educated in the gospel. And so the question has come up in this diverse and somewhat fractious congregation as to whether it is okay to eat meat from animals that have been slaughtered in pagan sacrifices, pagan rituals. Now, for the knowledgeable ones, the cognoscenti, it's just veal. There's nothing holy about it. But for others, they're not so sure. Is it disloyal to the Lord to eat this food? Are you in some way connecting yourselves to a pagan ritual? And for them, what will they think when they see these more knowledgeable members of the church who are probably viewed as examples, who are viewed as leaders? What will they think when they see them eating this meat? Will they go home thinking it's okay to be disloyal to the Lord? You see, it's harmful teaching. A modern example came to me when I was riding shotgun with my goddaughter's son, who is learning to drive. And his parents, who are in the back, were in the back seat, are being very, very strict with him, demanding that he obey every rule of the road to the letter, which meant no speeding, not even 1 or 2 miles an hour. And I can feel their eyes on the speedometer from the back seat. I think they asked me to ride shotgun with them because they thought maybe I might reinforce their teaching. But all I could feel was compassion for this young man, because after all, what has he seen all his life? His parents drive over the speed limit all the time. And I realized that what his parents know and what I know is not something that he knows. He does not yet know that although the police will give us adults a lot of leeway on our speed, that they will not give that to a teenage boy. And we know, but he doesn't know, that the official who administers his road test will give him no leeway either. So it is of concern to us what we show him, because he learns a lot by what he sees. But there's something going on much deeper here, and that is the concept of liberty. It is a matter that Paul brings up again and again in his writings, this question of liberty. But for Paul and for his hearers, that liberty, that freedom, is liberty from the law of Moses. It is the freedom not to be circumcised. It is the freedom not to have to engage in animal sacrifice. The freedom not to have to obey the more than 600 additional laws that are in the Torah. That's the freedom. But what Paul wants his readers, his hearers to understand is that freedom is tempered by the law, the servanthood of love, the law of love your neighbor. That affects your freedom. The entire preceding chapter in this letter to the Corinthians is just about that, about liberty tempered by love. So these Corinthian sophisticates, they were free to eat, but bound to love. Free to eat, but bound to love. This is important because we are a Corinthian culture today. We have lost sight of what liberty means, or what it meant to our founders. Let's all think back. What was the liberty that they were concerned about? Go back, high school history. Go back. What is it? It was freedom from tyrants. And it was freedom from systems of class or caste that hold some people back. but not others. Those were the liberties that the founding fathers were concerned about. Now, even today, we realize that not everybody enjoys that particular freedom of not being held back by a system of class or caste. And some who do realize that, they take it for granted. We take that liberty for granted. And having lost sight of the founding liberties, many in our Corinthian culture, many celebrate the freedom of self-expression. That wasn't one of the founding liberties, folks. The freedom of self-expression. Doing as we please just because we can. And attacking, perhaps, those who would prevent us from doing that. Now, I would not say that we were founded as a Christian nation, but I will tell you, of course, that we were founded by a lot of Christians. And those founders understood that we are bound to our neighbors in love. In our Corinthian culture, we are free not to wear a face mask. But in our bounds of love, we are not free to infect our neighbors. In our Corinthian culture, everyone has a right to their own opinion. But in our bonds of love, we are not free to hate. And we are not free to encourage others to hate. We are free to act in our own self-interest, but we are bound to take an interest in our neighbors as ourselves. Amen.